This gentleman has traveled from Worcestershire, England, or do you say Worcester as they do in Boston? Where are you? I don't mispronounce your hometown. He's traveled from England. He's trained in England and Germany for medical degrees, specializing in orthopedic osteopathy and natural therapeutics. The co-founder and director of the Bretforton Trust and medical director of the Bretforton Hall Clinic, I give you Dr. Peter Guy Manners. Dr. Manners.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here and a great honor to be the first speaker, but in typically American style, it's living up to traditions. They said, grab a sandwich, snatch a cup of coffee, see the press, do the television, you've got 15 minutes and don't be late, you're the first speaker. Anyhow, as I discussed this morning, we have been engaged in the research field in which I want to discuss with you over the past 25 years. During that time, the concept of our original theory has changed considerably. In the first instance, we were using sound. Sound, as we considered at that particular time, which was about 25 years ago now, was essentially for surface treatments. In other words, for muscular conditions or a joint or bone disorder, and that is basically what all the groundwork was set in to evaluate. And we did a considerable amount of work and accumulated many, many case histories going back to that period of time. But over the period of time from then, a lot more developments have evaluated. In other words, we have found that sound has a far greater implication than what we originally thought. Now, as a rule, I like talking off the cuff because my wife says I can talk and I never stop. So I've got to confine this to time, and I want to give you as many facts and theories as I possibly can. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to read a little bit to you so that I can convey to you the most important points. First of all, I would like to explain, I do like to give credit where credit is due, and that is I am not personally responsible for this form of treatment. All I have done basically is to put various parts of the jigsaw together. The origin of the work is with Dr. Hans Jenny of Basel, Switzerland, who did a tremendous amount of research, and towards the latter part of his life handed over the details of his research to us for us to continue with. Also, Professor Gaveau of the Sorbonne in Paris, for whom gave us a lot of help and details, Dr. Harold Saxon Burr of Yale University, and Dr. Brunner of Munich in Germany. Now, all these very important and valuable people were working in their own fields exclusively. What we have basically done is to find that all these parts and pieces fit together, and by fitting them together we have evaluated something which has now become known as cymatic therapy. Now, cymatic therapy is in use literally all over the world. Most countries in the world have 1, 2, or 3 instruments, by no means enough. But there are many, many of the instruments right throughout the world. We have lectured here in the United States, I think, for about 20 years now, bringing concepts and theories here. And many people complain, well, why can't I receive the treatment here in the United States? Now, please don't blame the United States government or the FDA for blocking out things that are necessary to you. I always like to put it this way. They are protective of the United States citizens, but sometimes they become overprotective, and by so doing block out some of the things which are vitally essential for you. Now, all over Europe, this form of treatment can be used, and throughout the whole rest of the world. But we still face a slight problem in getting it in here to the United States. But I'm told there may be one little space in which it can come in, and that is that if treatments have been used throughout the world or any other part of the world for a period of more than 5 years without any contraindications, there is a possibility that they look kindly upon it and it's received in favor in the United States. Well, this has been used for 20 years. There are no contraindications. There are no side effects. This we can prove. The evaluation of this form of treatment has been investigated by very many organizations, associations, doctors, both private and commercial, and we have found that there are no contraindications. We like to emphasize the fact that we are working hand in hand with the natural processes of the body. We are not creating anything which is artificial. We are not creating anything which is detrimental. It has been used in cases of pregnancy right up until a few days before delivery, with everything working absolutely perfectly. So if you'll excuse me for a second, I would like to read this to you. The cell, an essential organic unit in all living beings, is nothing but an electromagnetic resonator capable of emitting and absorbing frequencies at audible levels. This is essential. This is extremely important. We all know that ultrasound has been used for a very long period of time. We also know that this was developed in Germany, where I was working in a clinic, and a great many of the cases which we treated in that clinic were the result of ultrasonic treatments. Now, don't misunderstand me. Ultrasonics is not harmful unless it is used in excess of the specialized time. But in the early days, that wasn't recognized. It wasn't known, it wasn't understood. And in many cases, it resulted in cavitation trouble due to the exposure of ultrasonics. Now, with audiosonics, that danger does not exist because the body is audible sound. So what is life? It is the dynamic equilibrium of all the cells, the harmony of multiple frequencies which react one upon another. What is disease? It is the oscillatory disequilibrium of cells originating from external causes. It is more especially the struggle between microbitic frequency and cellular frequency. Yet the microbe, unicellular organism, acts also by virtue of its frequency. If macrobiotic frequency is predominant, disease is the result. And when vital resistance is completely overcome, then death occurs. If cellular frequency gains the ascendant, restoration of health follows. The importance of this theory becomes more apparent in view of the confirmation of its validity as shown by recent experiments. The practical application of this theory enables the cells to regain the full vital activity of their frequencies. And apart from the immediate practical application, this theory may be said to explain the process of the origin of life, the differentiation of cells and of living species. In a word, all the great problems whose totality constitutes the biological sciences. The fight between the living organism and the microbe is fundamentally a war exclusively of frequencies. If the frequency of the microbe win, the cell ceases to oscillate, and death is the ultimate result. If, on the other hand, the frequencies of cells gain the ascendant, the microbe is killed and health is preserved. Broadly speaking, health is equivalent to oscillatory equilibrium, while disease is characterized by oscillatory disequilibrium. It is extremely valuable, as I say, as we have progressed along this theory, we have found that more and more evidence has been poured into our research laboratories from people working along similar lines. There is a French doctor who has experimented with, let's call it bugs, shall we? Bugs in a test tube which can be activated and multiplied wholly, solely, and simply by a vibrationary field being fed into it. On the other hand, if that vibration or that frequency is changed, then the amount of the bug's prolificity diminishes. In other words, we're getting into a state or a stage in which basically we are able to increase or decrease the multiplication of these things wholly and solely due to the frequencies we're using. Now, this offers great possibilities, because instead of using drugs which have many, many side effects, we will be able to use frequencies in their place, which will be much more effective, much more gentle in their use, no side effects, no contraindications, a much safer field in which to work. If the nucleus is destroyed, oscillation ceases and the cell dies. Frequency is but the radioactivity generated within the cell. The recorded facts show that the vital cells of the human body emit electrons generated by actual radioactivity whose intensity corresponds to the frequency field. I would like to add here, just at this point, that we all remember the transplants that were done in the early days by Professor Gaveau at South Africa. We all remember that there was a measure of success and there was a measure of failure. When we contacted him with reference to these theories that we have, we had a very good letter back from him in which he stated that every single thing known to medical science had been taken into consideration. But the medical balance of the harmonic value of the human being had not been considered. Well, now it is considered. And very often the term that was used is that the body rejected the transplant. It doesn't mean to say that the transplant wasn't working. It doesn't mean to say that there was any malfunction in the ability to transplant it. But what it did basically mean, put in a rather roundabout way, was that the whole harmonic of the system could not accept the harmonic transferred into it by the organ. Therefore, if consideration had been given to the harmonic value of the organ, the transplant would have a better chance of being successful. The electrons are produced only locally as a result of polarization of organic tissues. The actual phenomena of induction and detection, in which frequencies play a leading part in the human organism as a result of oscillation of an organic circuit consisting of cellular nucleus. The living cell is an actual oscillator, an electric resonator. Its constants are fixed by the form and the nature of substances entering into its composition. The renewal of these substances by means of nutrition gives rise to local effects due to electrons liberated by chemical reactions of the living organism, which modify the constants of the cellular nucleus. The knowledge we have acquired concerning cellular sonic rate to consider under a new aspect the problem of the pathological conditions of cells, which we have seen function as minute living resonators. A phenomenon of oscillation is the cellular nucleus, is the outcome of sound, and is dependent upon it for its maintenance. We can easily understand that life, considered as a harmony of sonic vibrations, may be modified or destroyed by any condition causing oscillatory disequilibrium, particularly by the sonic vibrations of certain microbes which overcome the vibrations of weaker or less resistant cells. What basically this represents is that providing the harmonic value of the organs and structure to the body, or any of the microbes, virus, bacillus, whatever, within the system, keep in a moderated form we are in health. But if for any reason, and I say any reason, because remember, the conditions under which we live, the environment in which we find ourselves, the pollution in which we're subjected, are all part and parcel of upsetting this vibrationary field. So if for any reason that vibrationary field can be disorientated, then it arises the possibility of the multiplication of other frequencies. It has become made evident, but no paper has been issued on it up until the present moment, that the vibrationary overall harmonic value of the human anatomy and structure is slowly and surely lifting. In other words, we are lifting into a higher rate of vibration as a whole being. If we can put it rather simply, if we were able to take the vibrationary overhaul field of our great-grandparents, it would be at a lower rate of vibration than the frequency exists in our structure and our harmonic values. Now, due to this, various diseases have, according to the medical profession's technique, been overcome. Now, they have not been overcome basically by the ingenuity of the medical profession, or we in the medical profession like to say that, but it's not quite true. It is merely and simply that the field of vibration of the human being has lifted naturally to a level on which these virus, bugs, bacillus, call it what you like, are unable to operate. Therefore, many of you may remember not so long ago in the national press, it was said that the research laboratories could now destroy your vaccine for smallpox as we have now overcome smallpox. It isn't we who have overcome smallpox. It's the human evolution which has overcome smallpox. But if for any reason, the vibrationary force field of the human race was to slip back into the frequency field which existed when that was prevalent, we should go back to it. That is why it is essential that in this day and age, the medical profession change their attitude towards teaching. We must teach the new medical students coming along the concepts which are evolving and being manifest and proved and being shown in the new research fields, whether you call it New Age medicine, progressive medicine, or whatever you like to term it, it doesn't really matter. We've gone through all those stages. In the first instant, it was called fringe medicine. A stupid term. I always imagined it all had tassels and fringe on it. But we've come through that barrage, and now we're moving into holistic medicine. And gradually and slowly and surely, it's now becoming future medicine, advanced medicine. In other words, it's gaining respectability. Because let's face it, everything, whatever we use, had to be new once. The term orthodox or unorthodox is basically stupid. Orthodox merely means that it's been used for a long time. And it's possibly years out of date. Unorthodox means it's new and perhaps haven't had a sufficient time of trial. But it is still can be, and invariably is, very respectable. It is essential that the amplitude of oscillation should have an adequate value so that the organism may be in a sound defensive state against the harmful vibrations of certain microbes. The microbe is a living organism vibrating with a frequency higher or lower than that of the organic cell, causing in the living being an oscillatory disequilibrium. The sound cell, which can no longer oscillate normally, is then forced to modify the amplitude or the frequency of its own vibration, which the microbe overcomes more or less completely by induction. As a result of being forced to vibrate under abnormal conditions, the cell can no longer function normally. It is in fact diseased cell. In order that it may be restored to health, it must be treated by means of an adequate frequency, which in recharging the cell with the required energy achieves the dual purpose of restoring it to health and its original normal state. You see, it is obvious that medicine must, it is inevitable, it must move into this phase, this acceptance of treatment. We must move away from drugs, and we must move into restoring that which is the basic concept of even life itself. A very famous man here in America once made a statement in one of his books and papers in which he said, "Sound will be the medicine of the future." Well, I was an up-and-coming medical student at that time, and when I read that, I thought to myself, well, that man's mad. How on earth can we use sound in place of medicine, knowing all we do about drugs, and I was learning more and more every day? What on earth can sound have to do with it? Absolutely nothing. Well, I've changed my mind completely. He could see farther ahead than I could, obviously, and he knew that sooner or later this thought would dawn on the human race. Sooner or later we would realize that our shape, our form, everything that we are, our very existence, is basically nothing but sound. If that sound, for any reason, was to change, we are a mutation. We are a changed person. We can formulate by sound all sorts of fantastic things. I was lecturing to a whole lot of medical students on one occasion, and you get an awful lot of throwbacks from medical students, believe you me. So one of them got up and said, "Are you actually saying that by the use of sound you could make something function and work and look exactly like a human cell?" I said, "Basically, yes." "Oh, well," he said, "could you do it and show it?" I said, "Well, we're here for a week, so I'll come back at the end of the week and we'll show you." Well, we're going to show you that on slide in a moment. The first time we took a photograph of a human cell under the microscope, terrifically enlarged, and you all basically know what it looks like. It looks like a round sort of donut affair, but instead of having a hole in the middle, it has a slit in which it is constantly evolving into itself and out, pulsing and pulsing the whole time, and that is a living cell. Well, now, by accepting the frequency of that and using an ordinary piece of plastic, just in a very soft, jelly-like form, and putting it on the plate exactly the same as Hans Jenny did, and putting that frequency in, we made it look, we made it behave exactly like a human cell. But when we put it up on the screen, I said, "Well, what is this first one?" Well, they said, "That's obvious. Highly magnified picture of a human cell." So then we put the other one up. "Well, what's this one?" "Well, it's the same thing, slightly different shape, but basically the same thing." I said, "Wrong. The first one is made, we say, presumably by the Creator, by God, if you like. But the second one is made in a laboratory by man. It's doing the same thing, but if you stop the sound, it dies. The sound is not within it. It's outside it." It makes us all think, doesn't it? What sound keeps ours in movement? The sound inside or the sound outside? And if that sound is outside, if for any reason it should change, do we change? There's every possibility. There's every possibility that the fact that you look as you do, with a head and 2 arms, 2 legs and a torso, is wholly and solely the result of sound. If we change that sound, it becomes a mutation. The problem confronting us is somewhat like the dilemma in which a rescuing individual finds himself when rushing to succor a friend in danger. He sees him faced by powerful aggressors, but he dare not make use of his weapons for fear of injuring his friends, struggling with his assailants in a great scuffle. This is where the medical profession is. We can prescribe the drugs which will affect the condition, but in so doing, we very often damage the surrounding areas or cause side effects which are inevitable. If, therefore, we can find another way, another direction, this is what we've called our paper, another direction, another way. If we can find another way, then we must find it, and we must use it. It is perhaps to be expected that some people may express astonishment that an electrical theory of life and of the living cell should be extended to microbes, for until now microbes have not been studied from an electrical point of view. Let us refer to an experiment carried out by biologists which demonstrate that microbes are endowed with peculiar electrical properties which have remained hitherto unexplained. The microbe of typhoid, Bacillus typhosus, and the Bacillus coli are inextricably alike. The typhoid bacillus causes typhoid fever in men. It is found in the organs of typhoid patients and can be cultivated. It is shaped in the form of a rod. This form of the bacillus may undergo modifications. It is very motive, possesses vibral cilia and travels swiftly across the microscopic field. As regards the bacillus, the Bacillus coli, it is invariably present in the intestine in man as well as in animals. It is generally harmless, but it may become pathogenic. This latter variation resembles the typhus bacillus, but it is less motile and shows but few cilia. It is also susceptible to cultivation. Here you have 2 microbes which basically almost look alike, but one can live in man without any damage, and the other can destroy. So therefore the variation, the slight variation in the frequency field applicable to these organisms is very, very minute. Now, over the period of 20 years, we have been able to assess most of the frequency fields of the human anatomy. These are all listed and tabulated, and it's work to do. And as I say, it's taken almost 20 years. Each day we're adding a few more to it. But we recognize, know, and understand, and can, by the aid of the computer, which is in the instrument, which is a cymatic instrument, we can compute the frequency field which is applicable to the intestine or the stomach or the heart, lungs, liver, muscles, bones, whatever you like. Now the first question that someone will ask, now does that mean that my intestines are exactly the same as my next door neighbor's? No, it does not. But what it does mean is that there is a basic constructive pattern. If you look around you at all your neighbors, they all have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso. It is all held together basically by a structure, which is the skeletal structure. But they all look alike. They all look different. None of them look alike. They all have their individual sort of patterns. They're all slightly different. The same thing applies to the organs. Within all the organs, now please don't ask me the question why this, because I don't know. Within the organs, there is a basic structural value of 5 frequencies. Now why 5, I really don't know. Lots of people at various lectures and seminars will give me very wonderful answers of why there is 5. Oh, it's a sacred number, it's a holy number, it's a something or other number. There's lots of expressions why. Well, I don't argue with any of them because I don't really know. But there are basically 5 frequencies. Over the period of time, we tried first with 1. No results. Aggravation, irritation, annoyance. We tried 2. No success. 3. In the early days, it was a very hard struggle to keep your concepts and ideas together, facing all these sort of disasters as they were. 3, 4, and then 5. When we're completely sort of beginning to give up, we found that the 5 started to work. We started to get a reaction. We started to find that we could unlock tense muscle structures. We could get joints to begin to move. We could get intestinal tracts to start to pulse and function. We could clear mucus from lung tissue and structure. Well, to be able to do it is one thing in the medical profession, but you've got to explain how and why before you dare say anything about it. I think this is rather like the position in which the American government finds itself. I'm sure the FDA know that all these things work. They know that many of the things, other than what I'm talking about, work and function. But like the medical curriculum and idea, you must explain exactly how and why in scientific terms. But please don't misunderstand the term scientific terms. Scientific term is not a bogey expression. It doesn't mean a lot of old men with long beards and white coats creating atom bombs. That is not what science is basically about. The word science merely means explaining the theory or the concept of what you have, what you know, and what you use in accepted terms in relation to other things which we know and experience. That's all it basically means. Well, now, at the present moment, we are able to explain cymatics in relation to the accepted terminology of the things we know. Well, now, I could go on talking for the rest of this conference, but I'm getting a signal from the back of the hall that it's time to ease it down. Now, I have some slides here which I would like to show you. Now, they are not, I emphasize, they are not medical slides. They are slides that are built on the concept of Dr. Hans Jenny's work, who started this going. What I would like to explain to you on these slides is what they represent. I like to, as I said, to pay homage. This is Dr. Hans Jenny of Basel, Switzerland, whose research work was handed over to us. A very great man, very important man. Without him, we wouldn't be where we are today in this field of research. So I like to pay homage to him. Now, this is one single drop of water. No chemicals added, nothing added to it whatsoever. It's merely one single drop of water into which is being placed a vibration. The The vibration is a heavy vibration, and therefore it lies to your eyes. It makes you would think it is almost solid, but it isn't. It's merely because that vibrationary field is being fed into it. Now, with the same drop of water, if we change the frequency, it's the same water. There's nothing added, nothing taken away. It's merely the frequency. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because we're running short on time. These are merely changing frequencies. By the way, these are single frequencies, not the frequencies which are used in the human body. If single frequencies are used in the human body, and they were used in the early days, remember, but they caused irritation and aggravation because it merely aggravates a tissue and cell structure. Also, the frequencies which are transmitted into the body are not electrical in that sense of the word. You're not being fed by an electric current from a mains plug in a building. It is merely the sound. We only utilize the sound, that's all. These are merely changes in frequencies. And if you notice, they become more and more ethereal as we change these frequencies. This is to show you how, when two frequencies change over, how you can see by quick photography how one will change to the other. The apparent molecular structure created by the sonic field will change. The underlying one shows the sort of circular form, and the top one square forms. It also brings it up into forms of layers. The water will form up into layers, almost one above the other. This is a close-up showing how it forms. There's nothing particular about this. There's nothing spectacular about it. It's merely water and sound, nothing else. Now, if we take a close-up, very, very close-up, under a microscope, we find that it forms a kind of infiltrating pattern. No, this is not a fern, and it's not a leaf. It is merely two different substances, one water and one oil, and the oil is being activated by a frequency field which causes it to impregnate into the water. It will circulate. Now, if we magnify it still further, we will find what is happening is that the tentacles are beginning to swing round and turn into each other and take over. Always, without exception, in these fields, we find that any, whether it's liquid or fine powder, under sound formation will endeavor to struggle itself into a solid. It will endeavor to form itself inside, it will wrap itself inside of itself. This is a close-up again, highly magnified again, showing how those small tentacles go out, bend round and close in. In other words, more or less, taking over. If we use semi-solids, which is merely a lump of plastic, I don't even know what it was basically used for. I merely pinched it from one lab to another. But I went down, I thought to myself, I wonder what that would do if we subjected it to sound vibration. So I grabbed a big piece of it and put it on, and the frequency formulated that form and shape. Now, the intriguing part about this is that although it forms that shape and will hold it for just as long as that frequency is in there, within that structure, it is in a constant state of motion. The molecules are turning round and round inside that form and that shape. This is what gave us the first results or the first enthusiasm on our theory, because we thought, well, here we have the sort of basic concept of the human anatomy and structure. So if we change the frequency, we got another form. Nothing spectacular about it. It is merely basically the same thing. But if we alter the frequency back, it'll go back to that shape and will stay like it as long as that frequency, whichever it may be, is existing within it. All sorts of forms and shapes will build up. But the material within it is in a constant state of movement. This is rather like the human body. Within your body, it's in a constant state of movement. In other words, it's living and dying all the time. The cells are being destroyed as you're sitting there, and new ones are being created. So therefore, it's in a constant state of agitation. If you all come back to next year's conference, and I hope you all will, although you'll all look basically the same, you'll all be new people. I love this expression because no man can enter into the kingdom of heaven unless he be born again. Perfectly true, you can't. Now, another significant point is that according to the substance, so it takes on an individual action in accordance with whatever frequency is being used. So if you put it into several different composites of material, it will form up into different layers. Now, this is just one layer of sort of plastic in which all the different values are formed into different layers within it. Now, if you compare this with the layers of the mountain ranges of the earth, it is basically the same. Was the whole of the earth constructed in this way? It tells you in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Well, suppose we put that into a modern idiom and say into the great void of space came sound and matter took shape. Makes sense. This is another just piece of nonsense. We were treating a spinal case on a patient, and I came through the laboratory, and I had in my hand the magnetic tape that we were using on the patient. And one of the assistants had been using some plastic for experimental pictures, so I put the tape in and played it. Now, I'm not going to say that that's the vertebral column, but that's the picture it produced. Rather amusing. Another pattern produced by a single frequency, rather interesting. No actual value, just interesting, that's all. Now, this is more interesting. This is oil and water again, in which we've stained it, or colored it rather, with a colored light over it, so that in the film, this is a still from the film, you can actually see it moving. But while the vibrationary force field feeds into this, those pieces in the center will pulse and move just like living amoebas. It will just look like living substance. But it only owes its life wholly to the sound. Stop the sound and it would all disintegrate and fall apart. As long as the sound's there, it'll keep on moving and pulsing. Again, it's a close-up similar to the one we had before. Again, a close-up again. Again, a solid substance showing how it'll pulse within itself. Another one. Now, this is the one that's interesting. This again is water in which a dye has been put. But you will see how, as the vibration persists, so it turns within itself. It's struggling to form itself into a solid, as if it's trying desperately to solidify itself. Now, another significant point about this is that many of you here will be conversant with acupuncture, and if you look at it, you can see the yin and the yang symbol of ancient China, which is 5,000 years old. Now, did they know 5,000 years old? What we're rediscovering today is an interesting thought. This again will show you how the two substances endeavor to turn within themselves. Again, showing the black and the white. It's the same thing, but reverse colors. Now, this is a highly magnified picture of the thumbprint of a newborn baby, magnified many thousands of times. And the medical students, they're always out for a laugh, and they said, I bet you can't reproduce that. We nearly got there. This is merely lycopodium dust, but being vibrated to a frequency which is very near to it. Here we have cellular development. This is a cell. The outer perimeter of that is constantly moving into the center and folding in working its way back out and around. That is a living cell. I'm sorry that's upside down. That's because they rushed me. This is plastic, but it'll do exactly the same as that will do, but that is a living thing. That is being created and moved by sound. Now, what sound is moving that one? That's the interesting factor. Whether you call this prana or spirit or life force or whatever, but something, somehow, somewhere, is creating the energy that makes that move and exactly the same as that one does. This is only, again, a little bit of nonsense, but we lecture quite a lot in Asia, to the People's Republic of Red China, Korea, Vietnam, India, Ceylon, all these kind of places. Now, these medical people are all trained and educated in the effect of sound in relation to chants and medellas and all these kind of things, the chakras, which we in the West knew little or nothing about. But the fact that we lectured there, we had to find out something about it. So just, I shouldn't say for more amusement than anything else, we gained the recording of the Om mantra and put it onto a field in which we had water and fine pieces of plastic. And to our utter surprise, it created this form which is on your right. The form on the left is a photograph of the Om mantra. And on this side is what it formed up. We were so intrigued that we added a bit of color to it so that you could see it better. Another interesting factor, the one on your right is the one we showed you first, of the drop of water. The one on the left, we have no idea what it is, but it's carved and engraved on most of the monoliths of the ancient civilizations of South America. We found it again and again. We've investigated a lot of these ancient forms of health and medicine in our research program, and we took this photograph out of interest, and we found that the two fit together. We also saw in one of the writings that the secret of life is written in the stones. I have no idea what that means, but can it possibly be, I say possibly, because perhaps I'm skeptical, can it possibly be that they were endeavoring to leave some indelible mark behind that they knew what we are doing now? I don't know, but I leave it to your discretion. Now, this one is rather fun. On your right-hand side is a photograph taken by the telescopes on the mountains here in California. And I'm not quite sure which one it is, Orion or one of those. Anyhow, it's a body in the sky which is whirling round, and I suppose in another million or so years it will create a solidified form, another planet, another star, I don't know. But the fact is it's whirling round and round and endeavoring to form itself into a solid, much like the research work we're doing. Now, this kind of sound comes from outer space, and the telescopes of the Jodrell Bank in the United Kingdom record this sound. We asked them if they'd let us have a recording of it, which they did. We put that recording onto a plate, and we produced that kind of thing which is on your right-hand side, which is doing exactly the same thing, but it's only dust. I've got to go very quickly because they're telling me I'm overrunning time. Another interesting fact, on my side here is the two changing frequencies in water structure. On the other side is nothing to do with water whatever, but there's a similarity, as you notice, and that similarity is merely a photograph of the roof of Chartres Cathedral in France. And Chartres Cathedral, according to the book on Chartres Cathedral, was built by measurements of sound. Interesting. That is the instrument as it originally was, which we used. This, I'm sorry, that's upside down. You stand on your head to see that one, but that's the other part of it. And that is the instrument as it is today. Can we have the lights, please? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there is one other just little point that I do want to emphasize to you, that we're using sound, but we have now discovered that there is a power, an energy within sound which we hadn't known before, an energy which produces no movement on the air. Sound always produces a movement on the air. It creates an energy. If we transfer this energy into a limb which is paralyzed, we can get it to move. Those who are interested, please come along when we demonstrate it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.